They taught us the mask was for our protection, but we're finding out that true safety starts when we take it off. I'm Gerron Scott, and this is Black and Diagnosed. This is a sanctuary for the mind, a space built for those navigating the world with labels like ADHD, bipolar, anxiety, and depression. We're moving past the clinical whispers to have honest conversations about our lived reality. Pull up a seat, catch the vibe, and join us in the garden. So welcome to another episode of Black and Diagnosed. Today we're with Meghan L. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Officially, my name is Meghan L. I currently work for USA Today as a women's sports journalist. That's my passion. So that is what you're going to see me doing all the time, is talking about sports. If I'm not writing about it, I'm tweeting about it, I'm watching it. It pretty much kind of controls my life a little bit. So
Let's get to know you a bit. Let's talk about women's
yeah.
sports. Who is your favorite athlete currently?
Oh, why are you going to ask these questions? So I would say I really, really, really liked watching Alyssa Liu at Winter Olympics. Like, I just love the fact that she's super carefree, very much like, I do what I want, I skate how I want, like, and she just won gold. I mean, honestly, that girl's probably 20. Well, I don't call her a girl. Woman is probably 20 years old. And I think she has mastered the art of not caring what other people think, of not caring like what society says, how you should do, what you should do. It allows her to skate so free. And so I really, really admire that.
I'm 35 and still not have mastered the art of not giving a care.
Yeah.
There's a book on it. I read some of it. I was just like, I still care too much.
I think a lot of us do, right?
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's very hard. So who has been your favorite athlete that you have spoken to?
Oh, that's a good one. Wow. So I would say probably Venus Williams. I got the chance to interview her last year. And for me, that was almost kind of living outside my body, because I was, a kid watching her and her sister tear up tennis courts. And so she was some of that first representation in sports that showed you, like, hey, if you could see her, you could be her. She was that for me. And I remember, my family and I all huddled around the TV every time they would play, and we just watched them. So when I got the chance to interview her, like, to me, that was just full circle. Little Meg was like, wow, this is so cool. While, adult me was like, all right, pull it together, so we could do this interview in a professional way. But yeah, I just thought it was really awesome to be able to see that she's still playing tennis. And again, another person who's like, yeah, I do what I want. I dictate how how my life is going to go. And so I think it's really awesome that she's still carrying that on.
I got the chills hearing you talk about that. And I would probably pass out if I met one of the Williams sisters. Like, I am such a fanboy. I wouldn't know what to do. So kudos to you for being able to compose yourself and speaking to them. But that's part of the role that you do. So how did you get your job at USA Today?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'll give you the shortened version. So this was about, we'll call it 3 years ago now. Actually, yeah, maybe a little more than 3. So I would say in the fall of 22, I was working at a company, and I was doing content creation. And while I loved my job, I realized I was highly undervalued. And so I started asking questions about, like, hey, where is this role going? What do we see for me? Because they were putting more on my plate and not compensating me for it, asking me to do a whole lot that just wasn't in my job description, which I don't necessarily have an issue with you asking me to do more, but I'd like to see, like, a path. And so they didn't really have a good answer for, where they saw that role going. I just, basically was told, hey, gotta have patience with us as we develop this. And so I kind of knew at that point, it was like, okay, I knew I was leaving. I just didn't know where I was going. And at that point, I had spent 12 plus years in marketing. So I just thought it was going to be another marketing role. And so through the work of a career coach, I remember one day her asking me, okay, well, if work is not keeping you happy, like, what is? And so I was telling her, I was like, oh, well, I've been doing some writing and podcasting on the side, and that's really got me excited. Like, I just absolutely love it. And so she's like, yeah, tell me more about that. And so it became this thing, right? All of a sudden it was just a hobby, and then it became a real thing. It became a, like, hey, we could do this. Hey, you could transition into sports. So I never really thought to marry like my sports knowledge because it was already pretty big and robust before I got to USA Today. Never thought to marry it like with my content creation skills or my storytelling skills until that career coach. And so it felt like, walking around in the dark your whole life and someone says, "Hey, the light is over here," and they pull it and turn everything on and light it up for you. And so for me, it just opened this world of possibilities. And so to be honest with you, I still struggled about whether or not I could make that transition. And then I went to a symposium here in Atlanta called Black Sports Business Symposium, and I watched several people in the industry speak: Maria Taylor, Kimberly A. Martin, and I remember Don Staley was there as well. I remember watching and listening to Maria Taylor. She said it's okay to go left when your whole life you've been wanting to go right. And to me, that gave me permission to like actively pursue this sports transition. So it was honestly applying for every possible job I could think of that felt like, fit my qualifications. And then I got a call from USA Today and they were like, "Hey, we want to talk." And so, truth be told, I interviewed with them and then got hired some months later. But even then I was like, did I really just do this? Like, did I just talk my way into, a writer role, a journalist role? Like what? Like me? And I honestly, I don't think I ever like actually thought I would do this. It was always a pipe dream, like deep in the recesses of my mind when I would see people on TV reporting or, interviewing athletes or things like that. It was always, "Oh, that's cool." And that was really like it. I never gave myself permission to explore that. So shout out to the career coach that I worked with then. And then the rest of it was just, USA Today believing in me, believing that I could write, believing that they could help me become a better writer, storyteller. I just needed the platform and the runway, and I did the rest.
That is awesome. Kudos to you and your career coach in USA Today. They got a great person working with you. So that actually leads me to my first question. You were diagnosed with ADHD, and thank you for sharing with me, and thank you for being willing to be on a podcast and sharing your story. So let's discuss this. As a Black woman, you've been taught you have to be twice as good to get half as far. How did that pressure to be perfect force you to mask your ADHD symptoms?
Oh man. I would say that honestly, I didn't even know I was masking. That's probably the hardest part is I didn't realize I was masking until someone told me I was. So for so long, like I love my parents, of course, they had high standards for me growing up as a kid. And I was the type of kid who was afraid to bring home a B because I knew my parents were going to ask what happened to the A, right? And it's very early that you have these expectations and this people pleasing that comes in, this early masking of, okay, well, I can't talk about my feelings. I can't really say this was my best because it's not good enough. Right. And so it became a people pleasing sort of mentality. But even then, I had such a structured environment that I never really, there wasn't anything to really throw off, I would say, so to speak, like my ADHD symptoms. Um, and it wasn't until I became a mom that all of it kind of came unraveling. I had dealt with some postpartum depression after I had my first son. And I remember, talking in therapy and telling her about, all these things that was going on. And I just kept telling her, I was like, my brain is going 1,000 miles a minute about trying to take care of my son, trying to make sure I'm the best mom, trying to make sure I get myself together when I go back to, to work, managing a household and all those things. And even she was like, "Where did this pressure come from?" So this was a deep dive on like years and years of not realizing that like I had been masking the whole time. I had been holding myself together when I thought I had to be perfect. I had been blocking myself away in silent environments because the noise was too loud for my brain and not realizing that I was doing that. So I honestly I don't even think that I knew I was masking until then, until someone was like, "Yeah, this is not typical." And probably what should have gave it away, but I didn't realize was masking as well, is there's a running joke in our family that like if there's an emergency situation, call Meg because she's the calmest person in the room. And like, the joke is like, okay, well, God forbid the house is on fire. Meg is gonna be like, "Okay, everyone, just let's get out. Like let's go." And I don't really like react in those emergency situations where most people would be like, "Oh my gosh, the house is on fire. I don't even know what to do. I don't know how to move." And so for me, I was able to, I didn't realize I was hyper focusing at that moment to be able to do that in those situations. So Yeah, I don't know that there was ever really like a moment where I realized, okay, well, I've been masking for a long time until until I had my first son, and then it was like, okay, girl, like how long has this been going on? And then it became I had to start asking my parents questions like, did you guys know about these things? Did you notice things about me when I was a kid? And then it slowly poured out of like, oh yeah, we had to do certain things like this for you, and you know, I really wish my parents had like actually leaned into that a bit more because providing those environments for me early on, like something that supports me in my brain and being able to manage all the things that I do would have like probably not out it probably would have led to an earlier diagnosis. Like I didn't get diagnosed till I was 34 and I'm about to be 37 now. So you're going that long without, knowing is that I mean that is it's earth-shattering when you kind of figure it out.
So let's talk more about your childhood. Were there times when you were in school and there were times where teachers were like, hey, you need to get it together. You're talking too much. You're being defiant. And you're just like, I'm just being a normal person, a normal student.
It was more so that I was too sensitive. I was too much for people. I
Mm.
did not realize that like that was undiagnosed ADHD. I remember, the first time I got married, I remember my ex-husband telling me that I had too many emotions. And I, I, I didn't really know how to take that because I'm like, well, I wear my emotions on my sleeves, but I didn't know how not to talk about my emotions and how not to describe them because that made me who I was. And so I think that I just shrunk myself to kind of fit into those environments, to kind of fit into how people thought I should be. I would, if someone gave me feedback or something like that, there's probably a good chance I was probably going to cry. I was probably going to be upset. And I had to, I remember talking through, those sorts of things as a child to myself, like, hey, Meg, you got to pull it together. Like, if you're upset, like, you just got to grill it up and eat it and go on. And so, you're kind of masking your feelings because you don't want to be too much for everyone else. You don't want to be the person that's crying or the person that's overly emotional. But I realized like not only was I going through that, but I could recognize it in other people as well. And so, but I didn't realize like that was a sort of a superpower of being able to recognize and read emotions like that. Because again, I had just, I don't know, kind of balled up mine quite a bit. And I really didn't give myself permission to just be me, to really just be me and like let go of all of that. Honestly, until I got divorced. And before I got remarried, but like I just really had to be all right with me, really be okay with me and whatever that entailed.
You mentioned the word too much a few times. What would you say to women, specifically Black women, who have been told they were too much as when it pertains to mental health diagnoses?
Ooh, I think first of all, like you're never too much. You are more than capable, just the way that you are. I think when people say, "Oh, this person is too much," it's because they don't know how to respond to that situation or that person. When we get told that you're too much, it's because okay, we've not created an environment that is safe and warm and welcoming for that person. And so as Black women, I feel like we are often stereotyped of how we should act, how we should be in certain rooms. If she talks a lot, she's too loud. Or if she doesn't talk enough, she's angry or what, like all these assumptions. And so I think it's perfectly okay to be you in whatever capacity that is. And I think for me, one thing I've tried to impress upon just not only myself, but my friends as well is like, you got to go where you're welcomed. You got to go where you're supported. And I think you don't have to shrink yourself because other people can't deal with your light. Like that's one of the things that I've learned is like you don't have to do that. So if you're considered too much, like so I honestly I've started asking people why, how, like, and you'll see people fumble over that answer because they're not expecting that. They're not expecting you to challenge that, or they're not expecting you to ask those deeper questions because then that opens them up for scrutiny and for why that they view you that way.
One of the things I believe in strongly is taking up space. I don't care how people view you or how people look at you. Take up that space. If you feel belong there, take up
Right.
the space, whether it's sitting at the table, building your own table, sitting on the table, throwing all the food off the table. Do what you got to do because you deserve it. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard. So, along with the ADHD diagnosis, we talked about postpartum depression. How do those two play a role together?
Oh, yeah. So I would say, like, so as a new mom, I felt a lot of pressure to handle it all. And honestly, you don't realize how much they put that on you immediately after having a child. They want you to do skin to skin. They want you to pump. They want you to, get up and change the baby. Like, you don't even have a moment to just realize you had a whole human being before they're asking you to immediately jump into mom mode. And so I think your brain is still trying to process, oh, this human I just, grew for 9, almost 10 months is now out of me. Okay, great. Now I can transition into, what motherhood looks like, but a lot of it is very rushed because the focus is a lot of it is all about baby. And so I think for someone with ADHD it can be very, very overwhelming because you're still trying to process what just happened to you and you're already having to move to the next thing. And so the amount of thoughts that go through your mind of, okay, shoot, how do I maintain my sanity while also taking care of my child? And it's a lot. It can be a lot. And so I think for me, I just put my feelings down to the back because I was just like, nope, my child is priority. I got to make it work. And I got to be responsible for all these things, not realizing I had all these things whizzing in the back of my mind of, okay, well, this was a lot. This was unexpected. Maybe I didn't have the birth that I wanted. Oh, shoot, there's no manual for how to take care of this child. What do I do? I'm not getting sleep. Shoot, I got to pump. Like, you see, as I'm talking, there's so much going on that I think for me, I just put it to the back because I knew I was responsible for my child. And so unfortunately, it all came oozing out about, I would say, 9 months after I had my first son, where really I am held together with duct tape, trying to take care of my child, be the best mom that I can, try to remotely feel like myself when my hormones are doing backflips. And I couldn't do it. I really couldn't do it. And unfortunately, I like, which I don't fault my family for this, but like no one really said what they noticed. No one really said, "Hey, Meg, you okay? You all right?" No one really said that because they didn't want to upset me. They didn't want me to feel some sort of way. But I'm like, if you had, it would have taken me 9 months, to realize that like I wasn't okay and that I was struggling with way too many things on my plate, way too many things in my mind. And I think for the other thing with ADHD is that you hyper focus. So yeah, it was very easy to hyper focus on my child and making sure that they were good while completely disregarding all my needs. Because I knew what was more important, or at least so I thought at that point, not realizing that there's a balance that you have to kind of do when you are maintaining motherhood, who you are outside of motherhood, and then a child.
You used the word upset. Can you dive a little deeper in that? Your family didn't want to upset you. Was it because they were scared to, or they were just a little nervous?
Yeah, so I think it's mainly because, in the Black community, you don't go to therapy. Like, my parents grew up in a time and my grandparents grew up in a time where, like, you just pray it away. You go to God and you pray about it and, like, move on about your day. So really, no one in my family had really gone to therapy, and it really wasn't a suggestion. And I think that's part of the reason why I was like, oh, we won't want to say anything that like something may be like mentally wrong or she may be struggling mentally, because it's like, ooh, well, then we kind of have to admit that she's got to go to therapy. And so, I did the hard work of being like, okay, no, I'm not okay. And I found a therapist. But I think it was more so like, hey, we don't want to overwhelm her as well because she's already overwhelmed, with trying to take care of herself and the child. And so by adding this or saying this to her, like it could completely like unravel her. So I think that was, also in it as well. But I think a big portion of it is like, yeah, therapy is new. We don't go to therapy. That's not something we actively promote. And so, I think until I really kind of said, hey, there's some amazing benefits here. Here's what I've learned. Here's what I've uncovered in therapy. Yeah, it just really wasn't a thing that like my family actively pushed. And again, I think it just goes back to like it just wasn't something in the Black community that is like, oh, therapy is okay. Like it's perfectly fine for you to go to therapy and have Jesus too. I think that that it was just very new, still taboo at that point, until I went and saw the benefits.
Yeah, I dig that. Part of the reason for this podcast is to destigmatize mental health in the Black community. I personally just feel like it's not talked about enough and needs to be talked about more. The conversation is being started, but it needs to be accelerated. That needs to pick up speed.
Mhm.
So what are some stereotypes that you found along the way that come from the Black community when it comes to ADHD, or maybe as a Black woman or just in general?
Ooh. Um, so I think, Black women, we often get stereotyped as being strong, that we are, automatically the strong woman. We can handle it all. When you are, especially matriarchs of the family, grandmothers, great aunts, even just moms in general, um, you are often you're often taught from the very beginning to hold other people's needs above your own, to hold space for other people before yourself. And it's all about the family and it's all about supporting the family. And so I think that if you had learned early on about boundaries and support and what a healthy, um, or having, healthy mental health, I think that you would see a different sort of change in the Black community. I think you'd see a lot of it different with Black women. Um, and I think, again, I mentioned it earlier, but it kind of goes back to also, women are to be seen and not heard, or, you're doing too much as a woman, or, those sorts of things, those sorts of stereotypes that we just fall into. I would say that for me, I'm still kind of discovering like what the stereotypes are for Black women with ADHD, but I would say the more open I've been with my diagnosis, the more I've seen, oh shoot, there are way more people out here who are also dealing with this as well. And I didn't discover that until I got into sports, until I got into the media. Not realizing that there was a ton of creatives, people who write, they're photographers, they, are content creators or whatever else. Yeah, they're all dealing with ADHD. It's kind of like a superpower when you get to this space, and I can always talk on that. But yeah, there's a lot of people who are actively dealing with this and shrinking themselves to fit into environments because it's not something that you are taught to openly embrace. And so I think that that's something I would love to see going forward over the next several years, is for people in general to be able to be themselves and be open with what their diagnoses are, because you would be surprised at the number of people who are actually dealing with what you are as well, if people would, openly talk about it.
Yeah, I agree. Part of why I'm so open is because there are millions of us dealing with mental health diagnoses, a lot more than people think. And if we come together and we say, hey, we're here, we want to be seen, we want to be felt, our presence is needed, people are going to say, oh, okay, they're here. We need to make sure that they're listened to. We need to make sure that they're included. Um, you mentioned two things, a superpower and shrinking. Let's touch on shrinking first. What are some ways that you see people with ADHD? How do they shrink themselves?
Not speaking up for, what support is that they need. So I'll give you for example. So for myself, I've realized that like as much as I despise routines, I need routines. I need the stability because it keeps my nervous system calm. Right? Like I can eat the same things every day. I can do the same things every day. And some people might get bored with that, but for me, it actually keeps me calm. It keeps me very, very grounded. So when there's a disruption to the routine, now all of a sudden it takes me a lot longer to kind of come back to my routine, because I'm like, well, what is center? Where am I going? And so I think that, admitting that you need support, admitting that you need, structure, admitting that like when environments are overstimulating. So if depending on which type of ADHD you have, like just simple interactions can be draining. Or, if you go out to a concert, there's music, there's lots of people talking, there's chat, like that can be overstimulating as much as as much as you love it. So even those daily interactions or daily things that you do, I think sometimes, people with ADHD might hide that because they're like, oh, well, I don't want to be too much, or, oh, everybody's accommodating me. Like you got to speak up for, for stuff like that. I think I'm the first to say, yeah, there's too much noise. There's too much going on. I already got enough going on in my brain. I don't need the extra, like, sort of noise in the background. Or like, I'll give you a perfect example. So part of my job, and working at USA Today, I work for a site called For the Win, and For the Win covers a multitude of sports. So that is baseball, football, basketball, you name it, we probably cover it. And the first time I ever covered a Super Bowl was remotely, of course, with For the Win. And so for Super Bowl, a lot of people don't realize just how much is going on for a Super Bowl. There is outfits, there's big plays, there is storylines beforehand, and then you get to the actual game and you're trying to keep up with everything, whether it's a pick or somebody just got a really nice sack, or there's celebrities, in the audience, whatever have you. there's all these different storylines going on. And so I remember covering my first Super Bowl, and it was like a normal day in our like workspace, but like over like times 10. So there's constant notifications, there's people talking, "Ooh, I saw this, ooh, I saw that." The TV's going on in the background. Like I am overstimulated and I am not realizing. I'm like, "Okay, well, what do I grab to write about? What do I do?" And so I remember pinging my boss and I was like, "Hey, I'm struggling right now. Like, this is a lot." And I was new. I think I had been there maybe 5 months or so. And I was like, "Yeah, this is a lot." I'm like, "Is this how it is always?" And he's like, "Yeah." And, we're talking through it. He said, "Well, how can I help?" And I said, "Honestly, I don't know." I said, "I'm not really sure, but there's like, this is too much." Right. And so he's like, "Okay, well, how about if I give you something to like a lane to stick to that you can just own that?" And I was like, "That's great. What do you want me to do?" And he's like, "Well, what are you comfortable with?" So we're talking through it. So anyways, we find out like, hey, music and pop culture stuff is my jam for the Super Bowl. Like, I don't have to worry about all the other big plays. Like, I can enjoy that, but like, I don't necessarily have to worry about it. So from that, I was able to advocate for myself and say, this is too much. Like, I cannot do this. And really gave myself a lot more calm after that. So after that, I was fine. I grabbed, I think, grabbed halftime stuff. I grabbed some extra outfits. I grabbed some celebrities that had cool, like, it was cool. And I went on about my day. Right. But it's in that moment of learning to speak up for myself in an environment that I didn't think necessarily was made for me. And everybody else was like, fine. But for me, I'm struggling. I'm at home, like pacing, I'm breathing. I have stepped away from my computer because I'm like, oh my gosh, there's too many notifications. There's too many things. I can't concentrate. And learning to speak up for myself and saying, hey, I need something to focus on right now, so I'm not getting so distracted and overwhelmed by everything else. So I think just speaking up in those environments where like, hey, I'm kind of overwhelmed, or hey, I could really, if you want to get the best out of me, here's the accommodations that I would love to have, because this is what helps me be my most productive self, if that makes sense.
I love the word accommodations. I think oftentimes people are scared to ask for accommodations. I know when I was doing my PhD program, I was scared. Um, I was scared to be open with my diagnosis. My dissertation was on students with bipolar disorder, and I was still scared to mention that I had bipolar disorder. The disruptions that it caused me, the lows, the highs, the very, very, very lows, the valleys, deep valleys. It was low. And I was terrified. Did you feel similar? Was it easy for you to share your diagnosis, maybe with work, with colleagues, with family? How did that necessarily, I don't want to use the word coming out, but how did that sharing go?
Yeah. I would say at first I was scared because I didn't know what sort of stereotypes or what sort of perception people would have of me. Would that change the way that people viewed my capabilities? I've always prided myself on being someone, so to speak, who has it together, who, is a hard worker, who can handle a lot of things. I didn't want to let people see the cracks, or so I thought were cracks in my foundation. It's a little bit of perfectionism there going on. And again, this is people pleaser, sort of, uh, I guess, actions, if you will, behavior, if you will. So I think for me, it started very small with like, oh, someone else said they had ADHD. And so like, and it actually started with, all the time at well, it was a person on my staff at the time who like messaged me on the side and was like, hey, I don't want to overstep my boundaries, but I heard you were overwhelmed. Like, I totally feel you. I also have ADHD. So if you need, anything, like, please, please say something. And that to me was like, oh, so I'm not the only person. Like, I was like, oh, okay. So I was happy about that. And then it became, how do I do my job, like, without letting it become my identity, so to speak. I didn't want people to treat me any different because they found out I had ADHD. And so I think in my line of work, you got to be able to process things quickly. You've got to be able to get things out. And for me, I'm already rushed and hurried. So like being in an environment where things are like rushed and hurried is like, woo, too much, too much. I can't even slow down. I can't think, like there's, what's going on. So I think for me, it was just, okay, how do I use this to my advantage? And that was really where I found women's basketball has been my main sort of passion, women's sports in general, but really women's basketball has been my sort of like passion, the thing that calmed me down, because I can go to a game people are screaming and yelling and going on, and I'm focused. I'm focused on the action. I see what's happening. I can describe it. I can pick out things. I can tell you who needs to be what, when, where, how. Like, I can do all of that. And so that really was like, oh, okay. Well, your brain may be running about 30,000 miles an hour, but here it's about 15 miles an hour, and you've managed to find an area that supports you, right? So it was really like, okay, how do I use this to my advantage? So I started being more open about it of like, hey, if you see me and I'm writing and I'm like, do not bother me. And I didn't mean that really, but like quite literally, don't bother me. I'm in a zone. Like, I'm focused here, right? And then it became me actually sharing it of like, for example, if you go to a press conference and people are talking, you don't really realize how fast people are talking when they're just in their regular cadence. So for someone with ADHD, it is quite literally, okay, how can I pick out the highlights of things and not try to get full quotes because I know I can't. My brain's going to forget it, or either I'm going to I'm going to flub a word or something of that nature. So I remember tweeting out like, hey, I have ADHD. So from my tweets or from my updates from press conferences, you may see shortened things. It's not me trying to misrepresent what this person is saying. It's basically so I can keep up and I can get the highlights of what people want. So I think it was just being more comfortable there. And then outside of that, it was actually being comfortable just in my own life of telling people or sharing with my friends, like this was by my diagnosis. Or I would say it was me realizing that like, oh, this has kind of been here all along. And then maybe if I had spoke up, it would have made sense. So I'll give you an example is if you have ADHD, a lot of people deal with executive dysfunction. So small tasks become a mountain. It is hard to do the routine type stuff like brushing your teeth or making your bed or even cooking for yourself. And I remember this was years ago now when I had gotten divorced and we were in our divorce proceedings. And one of the things my ex-husband had said to me was he was disappointed that I didn't cook enough. And, and I remember that sat with me. I'm like, was I being lazy? Like, really? Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of hit me in the chest. I'm like, geez, man, you got to be better. Not realizing the main reason why I didn't cook enough was because he had taken that off my plate. He was the one who cooked the most. He had been cooking since, the beginning of our relationship, and me not realizing, oh, that took off the pressure of me having to cook. That took off the manual or the kind of the labor that goes on in my mind of, oh my gosh, I've got to get the ingredients. I have to cook. I have to clean the dishes. I've got to plan for 5 nights a week. Like that's a lot for my brain. But I didn't realize that then. I didn't realize that I was actually struggling with it then. It's just someone had taken it off my plate. So I was like, oh, okay, I don't have to worry about it as much. Cool. And I kind of went on, not realizing, girl, you are struggling with that because it's a lot for your brain. It's a lot for you to do those multi-step things. It's a lot for you to manage that on a day-to-day basis when you already have so many things going on. So it was just kind of recognizing other areas and opportunities where I could speak up, where I could say, okay, cooking every day is a lot for me. How can I help? How can my family help me? How can my friends help me and support? Or brushing my teeth is hard. Is there someone who can body double with me so that I like on days where I'm struggling so that, I'm brushing my teeth and I'm showering and doing all those things. Like I was ashamed to say that. Like, what do you mean you're struggling? What do you mean you don't brush your teeth? What do you mean you don't shower? And I didn't have the answers for how to explain that this is really mentally hard for my mind. Like it is a lot. It feels like a ton of bricks trying to do that. So the more that I talked about it, the easier it got. Yeah. So the way like this was my therapist actually explained this to me, is on tasks that I struggle having someone do it with me. Because my brain and most brains with ADHD are built on dopamine hits. So it creates a little bit of dopamine, a little bit of motivation for you to be able to do what you need to. So like, for example, if you need to brush your teeth, let's say you're struggling that day,
Can you explain to me what body doubling is?
having someone quite literally brush their teeth right next to you, it's almost like tricking your brain and saying, oh, hey, they're brushing your teeth. You should too. Right. Or, if it's, I'll give you an example of if you go to the gym. Some people can go to the gym and work out by themselves and be fine. Other people can go to the gym. They're like, nope, I know I work out a whole lot better if I got a partner, if I got a group. That's also kind of body doubling as well, which most people don't think it is, but like it kind of is. It's extra motivation for you. It's pulling out what is already there, but bringing it to the front so you can continue to do what you need to. So body doubling has helped me in a lot of ways when I was struggling to establish routines after I had children, because my children completely threw off what was my normal life routines, and having to reestablish routines with new additions was really tough for me. So, shout out to my husband for like helping me through it of, hey, let's go brush our teeth. Hey, let's make sure that, because I won't eat either. I'll be so focused on things. Hey, did you eat today? Let's go eat. Like those sorts of things. And that really helps me kind of stay on track.
Awesome. Awesome. One of the things you spoke about also was superpowers. What are some of the superpowers that you
Yeah.
have?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I would say I have an ability to notice minute details or patterns. So I love giving examples because it's just the best way to explain. But so this was a couple of months ago. I was actually covering the women's college volleyball Final Four. And I was sitting courtside, and it's a really intense game, and I'm seeing them go back and forth. But all of a sudden I see two players look at each other, and they did this kind of like what I thought on was a mask on sort of movement. And I'm like, what is that about? Right. So I after the match is over, I asked the players, I'm like, because they were actually in the press conference, I'm like, hey, can you explain to me? Can you walk me through this mask on moment? And the player says, oh, it wasn't mask on, it was actually helmet on. Like, hey, put your helmet on. We're gonna dig in on defense here, right? And so they go and they explain the whole thing and why they did it and how it started. Then afterwards, one of the players said, I didn't think anybody saw that. And so it was such a small like moment in the grand scheme of this. You got 15 plus thousand people that are hollering and screaming and the volleyball match was going on, but I saw it because I was sitting courtside and I wrote it down because it was, to me, it was stood out because I'm like, I've never seen someone kind of pause and do that in the middle of a game or middle of a match. And so I'm able to pick out those details because I can hyper focus. I can kind of block out everything else that's going on when it comes to sports and kind of pick up on those things. Or for example, if there's a pattern that happens, like if I know a player always, goes to the left, they can knock down a three this way, or like, hey, they do a certain sort of Euro step before they pick up a shot and drain it, or like, hey, they actually skip on the court every time they're about to drive down the lane. Like those are things that I pick up. I pick up on those patterns, and it helps me keep track of players. So if I'm ever watching or covering a sport where, for example, maybe my knowledge is not as great as I would love for it to be, because it does happen. Sometimes you'll get asked to cover sports where you're like, oh, this is not my expertise, but like, hey, I cover sports. I know people. I'm going to do it. I will pick up on the patterns. What does this team do? What does this person do? Why do they do it? And I make notes of that, and then I go research it and figure it out if I can't, figure it out from asking the person. But it's helped me be a better storyteller because I'm able to pick up patterns and I'm able to tell you, oh, what you just saw happened 15 other times during the season, and it happened here, 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 and here because I wrote it all down, right? Or hey, no one noticed it, but this is when the shift happened in this game. This is when the shift happened in this person. Or, for example, I'm able to connect moments. So I'll give you an example of, I interviewed Asia Wilson a couple years ago, and I was talking to her, and one of the things she had told me is that the way that she defined greatness was she wanted to put up championships. She wanted championship trophies. She wanted championship banners, plural, right? So Asia just won her fourth MVP. She'd won another title with the Aces at the end of last season. So I brought that back up to her because I was in the room, and I brought it up to her, and she's like, oh, yeah. I remember that interview, but this was years apart. So I'd asked her, I said, how do you redefine greatness now that you've seemingly redefined it, right? With these new additions. And so I was able to bring those 2 points together and kind of create a story that way. So what seemed like, kind of, I won't say run of the mill, but essentially a regular day for a journalist where you're getting to interview an athlete, it has come full circle now, watching that same athlete who maybe only had one trophy at that time now has multiple. Now they have multiple MVPs. And so it's these touch points that I kind of create in my mind so that I can tell these stories. And especially if I ask the question and I got a really good answer, oh, you better believe I'm probably going to bring it up sometime later on, down the road, and I'm going to bring it back full circle because I want to connect that thread for people. And I think that's probably what separates me from most people that like are in this role, is that I try my hardest to bring in the context in a way that makes sense and a way that story tells on multiple levels, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that was perfect. I think people with diagnoses, they do have superpowers. It's all different, but I think once we know
Yeah.
what they are and once we know how we interact with the world, we're better able to see how we fit in. So that's great. One of the things you mentioned as well was therapy. For a lot of people, the therapy
Yeah.
adverse, even if they have that diagnosis, they're like, well, I got my diagnosis, I can keep it pushing. I can take my medicine and I can be good. So what do you say to one, people who are therapy adverse, and two, people who just believe the medication will work by itself?
Ooh. Um, I would say that, like, if you're being honest with yourself, like, therapy is the equivalent to, in my opinion, going to the doctor, right? Like, some people only go to the doctor when they're sick, when there's a problem. But if you're keeping up with your health, you're going to the doctor for maintenance, right? You're going for your annual checkup, you're trying to make sure that you're good. Therapy is a lot like that way. And I think most people, when they hear therapy, they think that, "Oh, I've gotta go every week," or "I've gotta go every 2 weeks," or things like that. At some point, you'll get to a maintenance, you'll get to a once a month or once every 3 months or whatever works for you, but in my mind, like, if you're gonna take care of your body, why would you not take care of your mind as well? So that's the first thing. Secondly, you gotta have a therapist that you are comfortable with, right? So, if you need a therapist that looks like you, if they need to be the same skin color as you, same gender as you, same race as you, like, you gotta find some sort of common ground that makes you feel comfortable. And then finding a therapist that specializes in what you need. So if it's trauma, if it's, grief work, whatever it is, like finding someone who can help support you. And from there, it's you. You've got to be like, "Okay, I need help. Okay, this was hard," or "Okay, hey, this even made me happy and I want to tell my therapist about it," right? Like there's so much stuff that we like sometimes don't unpack because we don't talk to anybody about it or we don't work with a therapist to unpack it. And so I think even in some of my greatest moments in my life, I've been in therapy, and even for some of my lowest moments in my life, I've been in therapy. And both times I have felt like I've come out stronger on the other side because I was able to sort through my feelings. And therapy quite literally saved my life, I think, in terms of helping me to truly figure out who I was. I think before I turned yeah, honestly, before I joined USA Today and before I turned, 34, 35, like, I thought I knew who I was. You think you know who you are in your 20s and really in your early 30s, but you honestly, you don't have any idea until you get to a point where you're like, "Okay, I'm comfortable with everything that is me. I've discussed what comes with me, and then I've got a support system that also supports me." And here's the thing, I think people also realize they think that they gotta be the same version of themselves. You know what I mean? Like, their entire lives, "Well, this is just me," or they're afraid to evolve because it requires some really deep work, and I think therapy is helpful there as well. Like, you cannot be the same person you were at 17, of course, that you are at 37. It just doesn't work that way. And I think the way that you can help yourself by doing that is by having that support, and so I tell anybody, like, yeah, I'm on therapy regularly. I mean, I could be, ecstatic and happy, and I'm gonna tell my therapist about all the good things that's going on, because we wanna, break it down, or I could be sad or, frustrated or confused or whatever the emotions I'm feeling, I'll break it down. And I'll give you one more. As someone who probably should do this a lot more than I do, admittedly, journaling has helped as well. That is sometimes my therapy in between my sessions. So being able to sort out my thoughts because sometimes it's a lot up there. So if I'm able to, hone it and write it down and name it, whatever the feelings are, it helps me organize it a lot better. So then when I do go to my therapist, I'm like, "Yeah, girl, like, here's everything I've been thinking about for the last, 2 weeks or whatever else, and this is why."
Awesome, awesome. I know therapy helped me get diagnosed. Um, it, my therapist, he was amazing. He helped me be able to tell my story and be open to telling my story. I know without that, when I met with my psychiatrist, I would not have been able to share my story. So while he didn't diagnose me, when it's time to get that diagnosis to meet with that psychiatrist, I was more willing to tell my story. So therapy works. If you're listening to this and you're wondering if you should go to therapy, the answer is yes. Even if you think you don't, the answer should be yes. So when you're feeling overstimulated, how do you navigate the cultural pressure to stay composed and keep it together?
Woo! Woo, that's a good one. Honestly, I just started telling people I'm overstimulated, like, "Yep, you won't see me for a little while, I gotta reset. I can't do it, I need some silence, I need to be by myself, I need a vacation," whatever it is, like, yeah, just start saying it 'cause otherwise, like, I'll crack. I'll cry, literally crack, like come undone at the seams. I'll be crying. I'll be frustrated, overwhelmed. No, you just got to start speaking it up. But I just tell people, and I think my friends and family have realized, like, when I need that, they'll support me.
We talked about the 90s a little bit before we got started. What is your favorite 90s sitcom?
Oh, Living Single, without question. Without question.
That is mine. That is mine as well.
Is it? Oh, I love it. I love it.
Who is your favorite character?
So this is gonna sound so cliche, but absolutely love Khadijah. Like Queen Latifah. Like if she were to walk next to me tomorrow, I'd probably like lose it inside because I'd be like, "Excuse me." But honestly, I think it was because like she was honestly the most calm out of all the characters. Like, and I know that's like, wait a minute, there was Sinclair as well who was considered calm and that sort of thing. But I felt like Khadijah kept it together as much as possible. Even though she had her moments too, but she kept it together as much as possible, despite like her friends bringing home all their problems to the house. Like no matter if it was work problems, boyfriend problems, friend problems, like Khadijah was always providing advice to everyone. She was kind of like the glue, to that group. And so I really, really like the fact that like, she tried her hardest to kind of keep her friends level headed and trying to, as I say, navigate this 90s kind of world, as it was changing them.
What about cartoons? What's your favorite 90s cartoon?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I'm probably going to say Rugrats. I watched a ton of Rugrats growing up. Yeah, I like Rugrats. Scooby-Doo is probably up there too, even though it wasn't necessarily a 90s cartoon, but it was played a lot in the 90s. I don't think I could give just one. Hey Arnold's probably on that list too. So yeah, it's a couple.
If someone wants to contact you on social media to stay updated to what you do, how would they do that?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Threads, I'm on Blue Sky. It's all the same. It's ITS and then Meghan Meghan Hall HALL. So it's Meghan L Hall. Yeah. But yeah, it's the same on everything.
All right, this is the time where I turn it over to you.
Yeah.
It's your turn to ask me anything you want. It could be mental health related, it could be pop culture, anything that's on your mind.
Okay. If you could pick one moment in your life that changed who you are, like the core of who you are as a person, what would it be?
I think back to a moment in a grocery store with my grandmother. There was a lady, and my aunt bumped this lady and said something to the lady. My grandmother took offense to what my aunt said, believe it or not. And my grandmother told me, always be kind. Just be kind to people. You don't know what they're going through. And that's one of my pillars, is just being kind always. And that's changed my life. And that's just one of how I operate, is from a place of kindness.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Now I have to ask you, all right, favorite 90s sitcom?
Oh, Living Single, without a doubt.
Yep.
Like, hands down, I watch it every year.
Yep.
Like, every single year. Like, the last episode of season 1 and the first episode of season 2 are the two funniest episodes of TV history ever. If you don't know what I'm talking about for the audience, go watch those. I make fun of people who haven't seen Living Single. So if you're black, go watch it. I will take your black card. I don't really take black cards unless it's for Living Single.
Oh no. Okay. All right. So I was going to say, did you have then my question is going to be, is there a favorite episode? But I think you kind of answered it. So, okay. I dig that. All right. Here's the other question. So I like to ask this question because I think it tells me a lot about who people are. If you could pick a favorite movie, and you can only pick one because most people have multiple, but if you can only pick one, what's your favorite movie ever?
Ooh. Ah, man, picking one.
Just one.
I'm trying to think if I'm going cartoon or real life. I'm going cartoon. Oliver and Company.
Whoa, I haven't heard that in so long. Wow.
Oliver, I just love it. It hits the perfect sad happiness. It tells the complete story. You feel all the emotions. It's just great from beginning to end.
I love that. That's awesome. I haven't heard Oliver and Company in so long. Okay, all right. That was all my questions. That's all I had.
All right, thank you, Meghan. I appreciate that. You are great. You are great. You're going to continue to do great things. Thank you for sharing yourself with me today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
That's our time in the garden today. If this conversation resonated with you, or if it helped you feel a little less alone in the fog, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. This has been Black and Diagnosed with Gerron Scott. If you'd like to contact me or share your story, you can reach me on Instagram at g.scott, GDOTSCOTT, or info@gerronscott.com. Make sure you subscribe to get the newest episodes when they drop. Be well, and I'll see you back in the garden soon.